All right, so now let's talk turkey about sex differences. All right, so we've got primary sex differences and secondary sex differences. So primary sexual characteristics of someone who's biologically and completely female would be that she develops ovaries as her gonad and an oviduct, uterus, and a vagina. Her gamete is an egg. Then all of that is developed during fetal life, right? But estrogen production is going to lead to secondary sexual characteristics, much of which happen during puberty, okay? So secondary sex characteristics, the female begins to ovulate. She also has a menstrual cycle and begins to menstruate. She experiences a widening pelvis, increased body fat in her hips, thighs, butt, and breasts. She develops fully functioning mammary glands, and she has a larger muscle behind her femur. She also tends to have smaller hands and feet. So the last bits of those are secondary sexual characteristics. And I'm going to talk about those in a minute, again, because it's important as biological difference to understand how averages and populations overlap. All right, males. Males develop testes as their gonad, and the epididymis, vas deferens, seminal vesicle, and penis. Their gamete is sperm. They also have prostates, which are unique to males. Those all develop fetally, though sperm production is not really in full swing until puberty. Okay, now during puberty, testosterone leads to some secondary sex characteristics. Okay, the hormones cause higher muscle density, which is mass per space, bigger vocal cords, that's that Adam's apple thing. Okay, more dense bones. I say massive here, but obviously it's mass per area. And in front of our femur, we have a larger quadricep muscle. We also tend to have larger hands and feet. Now, let's talk about the tendencies like hands and feet, or a larger muscle behind the femur for a female, or a larger quadricep muscle for a male. Okay, we could also say males are taller and females are shorter. Now, all of those things being said, as far as secondary sex characteristics are concerned, okay, we're talking about averages of an entire population. These averages actually intersect with averages for ethnicity and overlap. So, males are typically taller, but lots of my female friends are taller than me. All right, even though I'm around average for a male's height. I'm a little bit lower than average, I think, at this point. Okay, so the point here is that not only is there an intersex distinction missing between female and male here, okay, but the secondary sex characteristics overlap. Just because males typically have larger hands and feet than females, it does not mean that you can tell me John is a male and Sarah is a female who has larger hands, and that's going to help me guess, because averages don't help us identify the traits of an individual in a population, because populations vary, folks. That's the source of evolutionary change. All right, now, the only genetic difference, as we've discussed, between males and females is actually the expression of the SRY gene during fetal development in mammals. Okay, so if you express the SRY gene, you're male, and if you do not express the SRY gene, you're female. This means a female can be XX, which is the usual state, or if sex reversal happens during meiosis or gamete production, she could be an XY female, okay? Now, the other thing is the female passes an X chromosome and half of the autosomes to a child, along with mitochondria and her DNA during fertilization. Males only pass their X or Y chromosome to the child, along with half the autosomes. We do not receive male mitochondria and the mitochondrial DNA from our dads, okay? So we're a little bit more like our moms than we are like our dads, interestingly. Okay, now, here's the crux of the biscuit. Behavioral differences between males and females intersect so completely with gender norm socialization, and the perception of our behaviors, okay? We judge each other based on the stereotypes we've been indoctrinated with and the gender norms that our society has indoctrinated us with, not explicitly, but the things that we believe because of the way we were taught by the way people behave about sex and race and ethnicity and all of those things, okay? So, there are some interesting trends in behavioral differences between males and females. One that I think is funny is that females are better able to recognize facial cues. Now, there's disagreement about whether or not this is neurological from the beginning or socialized, right? So in a male patriarchy, females need to be able to recognize people's facial cues because they're not in the position of power and therefore they're better at it. A way to check whether or not this develops during a lifetime, I would say, is to look at other groups that are not in positions of power and compare them to same sex, same gender identifying individuals of the group in power, white people, for instance, okay, and see if white males and females are less able to recognize facial cues than their counterparts that are minorities in a specific country where minorities have less power. Anyways, that was a really long side note. Sorry. All right. Males being more aggressive. This is really interesting because it depends on a series of other things. And again, looks like this could be developed during a lifetime because of gender norm socialization. So again, these two things, research has demonstrated them, but there are a lot of buts about each of them, okay? Basically, more aggressive, not all the time, not really predictable. Better able to recognize facial cues, not all the time, not really predictive of an individual's ability. All right, now, here's the cool thing. So we've identified places neurologically that confer gender identity and neurological places that confer sexual orientation. So there are differences in the anterior commissure, the olfactory bulb of males and females, gender, male and female gendered individuals, the dentate gyrus, the caudate nucleus, and the lateral geniculate body, okay? These differences have been shown to affect gender identity and sexual orientation. And in fact, the differences in the anterior commissure and the lateral geniculate nucleus only apply to heterosexuals between males and females. So in other words, might be relevant to sexual orientation in mammals. Now, I would distrust American society views about what's gender typical for a female or gender typical for a male, because these are often stereotypes. And here's the worst part of a stereotype. We start to believe